They came in silence. The stars, once scattered like diamonds in the black, now blinked with dread as the Galactic Council's warships hovered in orbit above a dead world. Earth. Blue once, now gray. Vibrant once, now cold. The lead cruiser drifted over what used to be the Pacific Ocean, scanning below. Static. No voices, no life. Just silence. Total, absolute silence. High Commander Thalix stood at the observation deck, eyes hollow as the planet spun slowly beneath him. He'd seen worlds burn. He'd seen genocides, plagues, even suns swallowed whole. But this was different. Earth wasn't destroyed in a blaze of violence. No massive craters, no firestorms, no alien banners planted in conquest. Just emptiness. Cities intact, roads still paved, homes untouched. But there were no bodies, no signs of struggle. As if the planet had just been abandoned, or swallowed whole by something the universe wasn't ready to name. Any biological traces? He asked his science officer, voice stiff. Negative. No heat signatures. No microbial movement. Not even decomposing matter. It's as if they were never here. They were here, Thalix said bitterly. They sent distress signals, begged for help, for months, and the council waited, the officer replied quietly. They both knew why. Earth wasn't considered essential. Not part of the high zones. Too rebellious, too emotional, too human. The council believed humanity was a risk to long-term galactic peace. Their independence, their defiance, it unsettled the elder species. So when Earth called for help, the council debated. They discussed. Then they delayed, and delayed, and delayed. Now Earth answered no more. The cruiser touched the atmosphere, sweeping over what used to be New York City. The skyline still stood, eerily untouched. A ghost city of steel and silence. Traffic lights still blinked red and green. A soft breeze stirred the flags of 100 nations. But no footsteps echoed. No children laughed. No sirens screamed. Launch a drone, Thalix ordered. I want boots on the ground in 5. The pod dropped near Central Park. Trees had grown wild. Nature was trying to take back what was left, but there was no animal life either. No birdsong, no squirrels, just quiet, like Earth was holding its breath. The retrieval squad descended next. 3 soldiers in full hazard suits. They stepped through abandoned streets, weapons drawn, sensors up. No enemies, no traps, just strange emptiness. A world still warm, but lifeless. Sir, one soldier said through comms, we're inside a residential block. Everything's still here, food, clothes, furniture. It's like they were just here, then vanished. Check comm logs. Surveillance, Thalix ordered. They pulled data from one of the homes. The last log showed a child watching a cartoon, then static. Power still worked, but everything stopped on the same day. Same hour, same second. Humanity vanished at 4:17 UTC, 7 months ago. The science officer frowned. Whatever happened here wasn't natural. It wasn't war, disease, or exodus. It was something else. Thalix's fists tightened behind his back. The guilt was heavy now. He'd argued for aid, pleaded with the council to act. But they feared Earth. They saw humans as dangerous, too adaptable, too emotional, too unpredictable. And yet Earth had asked for help. We failed them, he muttered. No, came a voice behind him, sharp and bitter. It was Advisor Core, one of the council's elite strategists. They failed us. Humanity brought this on themselves. If they had cooperated, aligned with council doctrine, none of this would have happened. They tampered with forbidden tech. They opened doors we sealed for a reason. What doors? Thalix turned. No trace of experimentation. No lab sites. Just a vanished species. Core's eyes narrowed. Exactly. They erased the evidence. They covered their tracks. You think they just disappeared? No, Commander. I think they ascended. Or worse, escaped. Thalix stared down at the planet. Escaped from what? The officer to his right turned pale. Sir. Long-range sensors picking up anomalies. Deep space distortion. From the outer edge of the solar system. Put it on screen. A grainy feed crackled to life. Something massive stirred in the void. Not a ship, not a creature. Something in between, blacker than space itself, with thousands of tendrils moving slowly, deliberately, like it was. Searching. Was that always there? Thalix asked. No, sir, came the reply. It just appeared. Exactly at the moment Earth went silent. They stared. And for a moment, the thing in the dark seemed to look back. The screen flickered. For a moment, no one spoke. Every officer on the command deck stared at the anomaly drifting at the edge of the solar system. It didn't move like a ship or rotate like a planet. It floated, slowly, deliberately, as if it knew it was being watched. And then, just for a split second, it stopped. It didn't move, didn't drift. It stared back. Thalix turned to the communications officer. Signal the fleet. Lock weapons. I want every gun pointed at that thing. Yes, Commander. A low hum vibrated through the cruiser as shields went up. Distant lights on other Council warships blinked to life. It looked like a coordinated act of strength, a unified wall of power, but inside, no one felt strong. They felt hunted. Advisor Kor stepped closer to the screen, narrowing his eyes. It doesn't fear us. It expected us. Thalix didn't like the sound of that. What is it? I don't know, but it's older than anything we've cataloged. That thing is ancient. And it didn't just show up now. It's been watching for a long time. You said you believed Earth did something forbidden. Are you suggesting humans summoned this? Kor hesitated, then nodded. Not on purpose. I think they reached too far. Broke rules they didn't understand. You know what they were like, curious, reckless, brilliant. They always had one foot in chaos and the other in glory. And now they're gone. Or hiding, Kor said. Or worse. They became something else. Thalix didn't respond. He just stared down at Earth again. It looked peaceful now. Too peaceful. The kind of quiet you hear in places where things are buried. Back on the planet, the ground teams were pushing deeper into the cities. Teams Alpha and Delta had entered what used to be the Human Defense Command, an underground base beneath Washington, D.C. The place still had power. The emergency lights flickered red. The air was cold. Equipment remained untouched. Desks still filled with papers. Screens frozen mid-report. One log read, Unifeed transmission, code black. Captain Rin, leading the Alpha team, found a vault sealed from the inside. They forced it open. Inside, the walls were covered in strange symbols. Not human, not any known Council dialect, but they were burned into the metal, literally etched in with fire. There was one console still active. It had a simple message blinking over and over. We warned you. We screamed into the stars. No one came. Rin whispered it aloud over the comms. Thalix heard it echo in his headset, a cold weight dropping in his gut. Play the rest, Thalix ordered. Rin tapped the console. A holographic projection flickered to life. A human woman appeared. Mid-40s, wearing military armor, her face dirty, eyes wide with exhaustion. If anyone sees this, she said, voice shaking, then it's too late. You're too late. They're already here. She glanced off-screen as if something was watching her. We tried to fight. God knows we tried. But this wasn't an enemy we could shoot or bomb or reason with. It wasn't alive in any way we understood. It didn't come from space, or another planet. It came from somewhere beneath all that. Beneath time, beneath reality. She looked into the camera. We found it. Or maybe it let us find it. At first, we thought it was a deep space signal. Like music, it was beautiful, haunting. But the moment we listened, it knew. It saw us. The feed glitched. For a second, her face distorted. Not just the usual static. Her features melted, turned hollow, then snapped back. I don't know what it wants. I don't think it wants anything. It just consumes. It takes minds, not bodies. It erases the idea of you, like you never were. That's why there are no corpses, no bones. It doesn't kill. It unmakes. Behind her, a loud metallic scream echoed. The woman flinched, then looked back at the camera one last time. Tell the stars. Tell the council. We warned you. Humanity tried. And we burned. The screen went black. No one on the command bridge moved. Thalix stared at the frozen screen for a long time before whispering, "What in the name of the stars did they awaken?" No one had an answer. The creature or anomaly outside the solar system moved again. Slowly, not toward them, but around them. Orbiting, like a predator circling prey. The scientists tracking its movements realized it didn't follow standard physics. No inertia, no gravitational lag. It just moved when it wanted to. Distance didn't matter. A young technician turned from her console. "Commander, it's broadcasting something. Translate it. It's not a language, it's a pattern. A repeating one, like a heartbeat. But wrong. The rhythm, it's invasive. It's making some of the crew feel sick." As she spoke, one of the officers dropped to his knees, vomiting on the floor. Another began bleeding from his nose. They weren't even near the source, but the pattern was in their minds. Thalix barked. "Cut all audio links. Seal external comms." The techs scrambled. Within seconds, the bridge fell silent, except for the hum of machines. Kor stepped closer to Thalix. "This is what they meant. The human said it doesn't kill, it erases. And I think it starts with the mind, with perception." Thalix turned. "You think just looking at it is dangerous?" "No. I think just knowing it exists is dangerous." The silence dragged on. Thalix looked at the stars again. Earth still spun beneath them, quiet and cold. No one had set foot on the surface in over 7 months, but somehow it felt like time had frozen the moment humanity vanished. Suddenly, an alert blared. "Commander," a voice cried. "Team Delta has gone dark. Status? No visuals. No comms. All trackers offline." They were 5 levels underground. Then another voice. "Sir, Team Alpha just triggered an evac beacon. Something's happening on the surface." The bridge lit up with chaos. Screens blinked. Comms filled with static. Voices shouted over one another. One of the feeds came back for a moment. Captain Rin's face appeared, her helmet visor cracked. Blood smeared across her cheek. "It's in the city. It's not just in orbit, it came down. Something moved through the buildings. Like shadows. Fall back," Thalix shouted. "Get them out." But the screen went black again. Then a cold, low voice, not from the comms, not from any speaker inside their heads, whispered just one word. "Remember." Everyone froze. Some officers screamed and clutched their heads. One collapsed, eyes wide open, whispering, "I saw it. I saw it before." Kor's face had gone pale. It's not just erasing. It's reaching backward, through time, through memory. It's rewriting the idea of humanity. "How do we stop it?" Thalix demanded. "We don't." That was the most terrifying part. Whatever this was, it didn't want war. It didn't seek conquest. It didn't even know hate or cruelty. It simply was. And its presence erased history. It consumed memory. Already, one of the officers looked confused, asking, "What was Earth again? Why are we here?" Thalix turned to the science officer. "Prep the archives. Download every file on human history, culture, everything. Store it in isolated black vaults. We can't let them be forgotten." The officer nodded, already moving. Then another technician whispered, "Sir, we have another transmission. Not from Earth. From beyond the edge. From the thing." Thalix hesitated. Put it through. The screen lit up. A single human face appeared, pale, young, eyes glowing faintly. But it wasn't real. It was a projection, a puppet, something wearing the image of a human like a mask. It spoke in a calm voice. They sang into the dark, and the dark answered. Now they are the song. The image flickered. They reached for eternity, and they found it. They are with me now. No pain, no fear, just silence and peace. Thalix stared, heart pounding. You took them. No, it said, tilting its head. They chose. The image dissolved. Kor stepped forward. Commander, we need to leave. Now. But Thalix shook his head. We're not running. Then we'll die. Maybe. But not before the galaxy knows what happened here. He turned to his crew. Send a system-wide broadcast. Full power. Tell every species, every colony, every world Earth is gone. The council failed. And something worse is coming. They nodded. And behind them, in the darkness of space, the creature watched. The broadcast went out. A warning, desperate and loud, echoing through satellites and quantum relays. From Thalix's cruiser to the outer rims, to the fringe colonies where miners never looked up from the dirt, to the silver halls of the High Council, where truth was always a little too expensive to buy. The message repeated on loop. Earth was gone. Humanity was no more. And something ancient had taken their place. But as the message left the system, something else left with it. A pulse, invisible, soundless, but undeniable. It rode the transmission lines like a virus, clinging to breath. And across the galaxy, thousands of receivers picked it up unknowingly. Machines translated it. Screens flickered. People felt cold without knowing why. Some heard whispers behind closed doors. Some forgot names of their children. Some stared into nothing and swore something stared back. On the cruiser, Thalix watched the last seconds of the upload. Transmission complete, said the officer, her voice shaky. The crew had grown quiet. No one knew what to say anymore. They stood in orbit of a world that was still spinning but no longer alive. And now there was something else, something they couldn't see, but they could feel it, deep in their bones. Like a memory they never had. A fear older than their species. I want full data backups, Thalix ordered. Multiple locations, air-gapped, no networks. He didn't trust machines anymore. Kor stood behind him, arms crossed. You understand this is only buying time, Thalix nodded. Time is all we have left. Then the lights flickered, only for a moment. A stutter in the power. But it felt like more. Like the ship itself flinched. Status? Thalix barked. No breaches. Systems nominal. But the crew was different. Quiet in a new way. Looking around like they forgot where they were. One of the junior officers turned slowly. Commander. I don't know my name. The room froze. What? The officer touched his own chest. I had a name. I know I did. It's gone. I remember serving. I remember the academy. But my name, I can't find it. Another voice. My daughter's face. I can't picture it anymore. A third. My father taught me to fish on a lake. I can't remember where. The water was blue. Or maybe green. Thalix backed away, heart pounding. Everyone off duty is confined to quarters. I want every cognitive scan running. It's not going to help, Kor said flatly. This isn't just memory loss. This is consumption. It's feeding. Thalix turned to him. Feeding on what? Identity. The bridge grew darker, though the lights were on. The corners of the room looked deeper. Shadows moved like they were breathing. The stars outside felt further away. Then the creature moved again. Not fast. Just one long stretch across space, like a ripple. It passed between Mars and Jupiter, and for a moment, every sensor on every ship failed. Cameras blanked. Gravity flickered. Several crew members screamed as their ears began bleeding. Something had changed. The creature was closer now, and it had noticed the fleet. Thalix's voice rang out, sharp and desperate. Prepare warp drive. All ships scatter pattern. Deep system fallback. Send coordinates to allied sectors. But it was too late. Every attempt to activate warp failed. The system still worked. Power flowed. Engines spun. But space itself refused to bend. "It's holding us," said the science officer, horror creeping into his voice. "Not with force, with reality. The laws aren't working anymore. They were trapped in a cage made of unspace. No movement. No escape." On the screen, the stars started going out one by one. "No," Core whispered. "It's not coming closer. It's making everything else go away." Thalix tried to breathe. His chest felt heavy, like the air was thicker. He could feel something sliding into his thoughts, something that didn't belong. In his mind, voices echoed. Not words, memories, but not his. A mother singing to her child beneath a red sky. A man dying alone in a trench carved through glass. A woman falling through an ocean that didn't end. Human memories. They weren't gone. They were here. With it, this thing hadn't just erased them. It held them. Every soul, every thought, every heartbeat. Trapped. The screen on the main deck flickered again. Another face. This one was older. A human man, probably in his 70s, gray hair wild, eyes wide and blackened. His voice was a whisper, but everyone heard it as if he stood beside them. "We opened the gate. We let it through." "Who are you?" Thalix asked. The face smiled, just a little, sadly. "I was the one who cracked the song. That's what we called it. The signal. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even a message. It was a rhythm. A key. And like fools, we turned it. We opened something. And something opened us." The man laughed then, softly, broken. "You think death is the worst thing? You think extinction is final?" He looked up. "This isn't destruction. This is transformation. We aren't gone. We're changed." The image dissolved again. Another officer clutched her head. "There's someone in my thoughts. I don't know them, but I remember their whole life. I remember dying as them." Thalix turned to the medical bay. "Inject neural stabilizers. Get her into deep stasis." The officer was already twitching. Her eyes rolled back. Then she smiled. It wasn't her smile. It was too wide. "Too still," she whispered. "We're not alone in here." Then her body went limp. "Commander," Core said, voice low, "we need to destroy the fleet. All of it. If this thing takes us, it learns everything." Thalix stared at him. "You're suggesting we kill everyone here. I'm suggesting we contain this." Thalix didn't respond. His mind raced. The Council had delayed action for too long. Now they had blood on their hands. But it wouldn't stop with Earth. This thing didn't stop. It just spread, quietly, patiently, and now it was wearing humans like clothing. They were inside it, and it was inside them. Another comm alert. A Council warship had just arrived from hyperspace, a last-minute reinforcement. It hadn't received the full message yet. "Abort their jump! Warn them!" Thalix shouted. Too late. The new ship appeared in system space, then immediately vanished. Not destroyed. Gone. Not even debris. Everyone saw it happen. The light bent strangely around the coordinates where the ship had emerged. Then space folded in on itself. The ship had never arrived, like it had been unmade the second it stepped in. "Are we next?" the officer asked, trembling. Thalix stepped forward. "No, not yet." He didn't know how he knew, but he did. Something deep inside told him they were being kept. Not as guests, not as enemies, as witnesses. "The last ones," Core whispered again. "We can't win. We can't fight this." "We don't need to win," Thalix said, jaw tight. "We need to remember." Core stared at him. "What?" "What?" Thalix turned to his crew. "Every ship, prep memory cores for ejection. We record everything this transmission, the faces, the patterns, the dead. We encode it deep. No networks, no AI, just metal and silence." A few brave nods answered him. "If we're going to die here," Thalix said. "We make damn sure the stars remember who we were, because that's what the creature feared if it feared anything. Memory. It could erase the living. It could swallow cities. It could make people forget their own names. But something about remembering burned it. Humanity had screamed into the void, and the void had blinked. If even a piece of Earth survived in someone's mind, maybe, just maybe, it wasn't over." The crew began working. Fast. Silent. On the main screen, the creature shifted again, bigger now. Stretching over half the system. It wasn't a shape anymore. It was becoming a concept. A presence. The idea of ending, and it was watching, waiting. Thalix sat in the captain's chair, hands shaking, but steady eyes. He leaned forward, looking into the void. "You hear me?" he whispered. "You took them. But you won't erase them. Not fully." He didn't expect an answer, but he got one. In his own voice, from nowhere. "We are not done with you yet." The silence was alive. It pulsed inside the ship like a second heartbeat, low, slow, patient. You couldn't hear it with your ears, not really. It lived in the corners of thoughts, in that pause before a sentence, in the hollow space behind your name. It was eating them, not quickly, but like something savoring the last drops of a meal. Thalix sat still in his chair, hands clenched to stop the shaking. His fingers ached, white from pressure. He didn't know how much time had passed since the last ship vanished. Minutes? Hours? Reality felt thinner now. The stars outside looked wrong, like they were painted on glass, and someone was peeling the paint. Reports came in slowly from the other cruisers in the fleet. All similar. Crew members forgetting their own language. Navigation systems showing stars that didn't exist. One engineer swore she saw her own dead sister in a mirror. Others saw entire rooms shift when they weren't looking. But what struck hardest wasn't the hallucinations. It was the memories, flooding in, wave after wave. Not their own. Human lives, human deaths, human love, human rage. The thoughts of 1,000 strangers bleeding into the minds of alien officers who had never set foot on Earth. A council security chief remembered holding his daughter's hand only. He'd never had a child. A medic wept while reciting a poem she didn't know. About sunsets over a ruined city. Thalix saw things too. A woman on a rooftop in the rain, waiting for someone who never came. A soldier staring up at a blood-red sky, whispering his name one last time before the world vanished. A scientist alone in a bunker, screaming at a screen while static bled from every monitor. It wasn't just a memory leak. This thing was forcing them to carry what humanity couldn't anymore. "We're becoming their archive," Thalix whispered. Kor looked up from the floor, his forehead slick with sweat. "You think this is some kind of preservation?" Thalix nodded. Slow, tired. "No, not preservation. A curse. Or a punishment. Or maybe just a consequence. The thing, whatever it is, it doesn't destroy in a way we understand. It replaces." He glanced toward the screen again. Outside, the stars blinked out one by one. Every second felt like the last second. "Report," he said softly. The officer next to him was young, still remembered her name barely. 5 ships still active, 6 are gone. No signs of engagement, just silence. As if they never were. Memory vaults? 73% done. Final encryption processing now. We'll be able to eject them soon. Good. Maybe they had one last breath to leave behind before the vacuum swallowed them too. Then a new alert. It wasn't a voice or an image, just a shape. Something crude, a 3D projection, rising from the deck. The shape twisted, bent, reformed. At first, it looked like a cube, then a spiral, then something worse, something that shouldn't exist in 3 dimensions. Some of the crew turned away, noses bleeding again. One officer screamed and clawed at her eyes before passing out. The shape pulsed, glowing faintly. "What is it?" Thalix asked. Kor studied it, frowning. "It's a lock." "A lock?" Kor nodded slowly. "Or a prison." The shape shifted again, It began to hum, a low sound like breath underwater, and suddenly, Thalix felt it not fear this time, not confusion, something else, awareness, like something had turned and was now truly looking at him. No more masks, no human faces, no shadows, just that pure, direct gaze. The bridge dimmed, not from the lights, from the ship itself. Reality thinned. Kor stood, trembling slightly. It's not just erasing this system, it's pulling it in. Into what? I think. It is the prison, or maybe the prisoner. I don't know. But Earth was the lock. Humanity triggered it. Thalix's mouth went dry. You're saying Earth kept this thing contained? Maybe not intentionally. Maybe just by being alive. By remembering. By resisting. And when they found the song, when they listened, it opened. He looked directly at Thalix. And now it doesn't want to be forgotten. The shape began vibrating. The humming grew louder. Some crew members dropped to their knees. Others wept. But Thalix stayed standing. And then it changed again. It spoke, not with sound, with thought. A single word pushed into every mind aboard the cruiser. Witness! A flood of images crashed into Thalix's mind. Not memories this time. Events. Things that hadn't happened yet. Worlds being swallowed. Civilizations going quiet. Entire star systems falling into a kind of stillness. Not dead, but unreadable. The future. Or something pretending to be. The last of Earth's warning made sense now. The creature didn't conquer. It spread quietly, deeply. Not with warships, not with weapons, with ideas, with presence, with silence. If no one remembered a world existed, did it still matter if it did? Kor clutched the edge of the console. This is bigger than extinction. This is correction. What do you mean? I think humanity broke something. They were too loud, too stubborn. They sang too far, reached too high. And now the universe is correcting itself, balancing. Thalix looked back at the pulsing shape. Then we do what humans did best. Kor raised an eyebrow. We scream into the dark. Thalix turned to the technician. Are the vaults done? Final encryption complete. Eject all cores. Set trajectories into deep scatter. Random paths. Far systems. Let the galaxy find them over centuries if it has to. Aye, Commander. One by one, pods launched from the belly of the cruiser. Each one held fragments of Earth images, sounds, thoughts, memories, encrypted so deeply not even the creature could reach them. Maybe. One final act of defiance. Not a weapon. A reminder. As the last pod vanished into the void, the shape in the middle of the bridge collapsed. The lights surged, and the creature moved. Faster now, toward them. Thalix stood tall. This is Commander Thalix, of the Council Fleet. He spoke into the recorder. Final log. We came too late, but we did not come quiet. If you hear this, if you remember us, if you remember them, then it's not over. He looked directly into the screen. Humanity was loud. Humanity was messy. But they were alive, and they fought. The cruiser began to shake. Everything blurred. Walls melted. People screamed. Kor collapsed, whispering names that weren't his. Thalix stood until the very end, until even the stars disappeared, until time itself stuttered. And then there was nothing. Not darkness. Not silence. Just absence. No floor beneath. No sky above. No air. No body. Not even the idea of a body. But something remained. A whisper. Not a sound. Not a thought. A presence. Drifting. Wandering. It had no name now. It had once. It had worn a uniform. Had stood on the bridge of a dying cruiser. Had spoken into the void. Had screamed. Now it floated. And yet it knew. Not everything. But enough. It remembered Earth. A blue planet. Loud, reckless, proud. A place that refused to bend to silence. A world that burned just to make the darkness flinch. It remembered humans. The way they laughed. The way they broke. The way they got back up anyway. It remembered a woman on a rooftop in the rain, a boy clinging to a dying dog in a frozen alley, a man singing to a dying star. Memories. Not its own. Yet, they were its own now, because that's all that was left. In the void beyond space, beyond death, beyond even thought, memory was the last rebellion, and the memory was still burning. Something stirred. Not far, not near. The idea of distance didn't apply anymore. A shape, broken, flickering. It was what used to be core, once sharp-eyed and cynical, now unraveling. His presence flickered like a candle that had forgotten how to burn. But he remembered too. He drifted closer. Or maybe the presence moved toward him. There were no directions here. No here at all. Just awareness. You held on, the presence whispered. No voice. Just meaning. Core's form trembled. It's still in us. The thing. The echo. I can feel it feeding. Then don't let it take the last thing. What's the last thing? Us. And for a moment so brief it might not have existed at all, they weren't nothing. They were two. Two minds. Two fragments. Holding on to the scraps of a universe now quiet. Then another flicker. Another presence. Weak. Fading. But real. More pieces. Scattered in the silence. Another spark. And another. Soon, there were 6. 6 survivors not of the body, but of the idea. Crew members, perhaps. Maybe even passengers from other ships. Maybe humans themselves. No one could tell. Identities were cracked and bleeding. Names were blurred. But each flickered with memory. Each spark carried pieces, and that was what the creature hadn't expected. It had devoured flesh. It had erased records. But the fragments of memory, raw, shared, half-real, slipped through its grip like smoke. It couldn't understand them. Couldn't fully digest what it couldn't frame, because humans didn't store memory like machines. They stored it in grief, in rhythm, in defiance. It wasn't enough to destroy a world. You had to destroy every meaning behind it. And this thing, it had never faced, something as irrational, as stubborn, as wildly uncooperative as human grief. The sparks began pulling closer. They didn't speak, not with words. They felt pain, rage, sorrow, but under it all, purpose. One of the sparks pulsed, growing brighter. The others turned toward it. It wasn't the brightest, but it was the clearest. It remembered the last command, the message. The vaults. Launched into space just before the silence collapsed. Dozens of memory cores, each carrying fragments of Earth, encoded in metal, locked in radiation shells. They were scattered, lost, but not destroyed, and they were still moving. Some were drifting through empty star systems. Some were already falling into the gravity wells of moons and dead planets. One had already landed, and someone somewhere was watching. The planet was cold, dark, a mining rock barely considered worth naming, on the edge of a forgotten system. The people who lived there weren't important. Not to the Council. Not to anyone. But they were alive. And one of them, a technician named Rallen, was staring at the strangest thing he'd ever seen. A pod, half buried in ice, pulsing faintly. He dug it up with the others after their seismic scanners picked up something metallic, but not natural. At first, they thought it was debris. Maybe war scrap from an old skirmish. But the material wasn't anything they'd seen before. It didn't match any known alloy. It seemed ancient. And yet, brand new. And it sang, not with sound, with memory. Rallen sat with it in his cabin for hours, days. Couldn't explain why. Couldn't stop. Sometimes, he'd wake from sleep and find it glowing brighter. Sometimes, he'd dream of faces he didn't know laughing, crying, bleeding. He started writing things down, drawings, symbols. Words that made no sense to him, but they weren't random. Others on the station began to feel it too. Arguments started. People dreamed of places they'd never visited. One woman claimed to be remembering the end of Earth, though she'd never heard of it. The pod had no screen, no voice, but it remembered, and it was sharing, quietly, patiently, a virus of memory. Spreading in reverse, not to erase, but to restore. Back in the void, the sparks pulsed brighter. They felt it. The vault had been found. That meant more would follow. The creature shifted. It didn't speak, but the sparks felt the change. Pressure, pain, a burning hunger. It was trying to consume faster now, crush them before they linked. But it was too late, because the sparks weren't separate anymore. They had become one mind. Not a perfect one. Not whole, not pure, but defiant. And in that defiance, a sound began. A beat. It was barely there at first, like fingers tapping a console, like footsteps down a hallway, like a heart. Badum. Badum? Memory wrapped around the rhythm. A voice whispered a name, another added a face. A third whispered a city. Detroit. A fourth. Lagos. Another. Shanghai. Then came songs. Screams. Laughter. Footsteps. Gunfire. Rain. Earth was returning, not as a place, but as a story. And stories were harder to kill. The creature shuddered. It had never failed before. But this wasn't failure. This was infection. Humanity had been swallowed. But in doing so, it had gotten inside the thing. And now it was burning its way out. Rallen couldn't stop. The dreams were stronger now. His walls were covered in drawings, faces, cities, oceans, skies. He didn't understand them. Not really. But they were his now. Or maybe he was theirs. One night, he saw her. A woman on a rooftop in the rain. She turned, smiled, and whispered, "We're still here." He woke up crying and laughing, and the pod pulsed brighter than ever. It was spreading, and far across the stars, on other lonely rocks, in other forgotten stations, other pods were waking up too. And with each awakening, the creature screamed, but no one heard it, because screaming is sound, and humans were now memory. And memory isn't something you can silence. Not completely. The void began to break. Cracks formed where none should exist. Reality pulsed. And the mind that had once been Thalic's opened its eyes. Not physical ones, but real ones. And in the space where the council fleet had died, a spark flared brighter than the stars, and whispered back, "We remember." The void trembled. It was not used to pressure. Not like this. Not from within. For eons, it had consumed freely suns, species, civilizations. Some screamed, some wept, but all in the end faded. All became part of the silence, and in that silence, it grew. But this one Earth did not fade. Humanity had vanished from the skin of their world, but their echo, their memory, remained behind. And now that memory was crawling through the creature's innards like fire through dry roots. It tried to close around it, tried to smother the fragments, but each time it did, they multiplied, not because humans were strong, but because humans were many. One spark became two, two became four, and each remembered something slightly different. A song, a mother's voice. A broken promise whispered in the dark. It wasn't the memories themselves that resisted. It was what they meant. Emotion, meaning, story. The creature could devour a planet, but it had no mouth for metaphor. Rallen sat in silence in his cabin, staring at the wall. He hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days. Didn't eat. Barely slept. He didn't need to. Not anymore. Not since the pod had opened. It hadn't made a sound. Just clicked once. A hiss. Then the shell slid apart like soft clay. Inside, there wasn't much. A sphere, barely the size of a fist. It floated now, hovering inches above the table, projecting warmth. Memory. It pulsed, and with each pulse, Rallen saw her again. Not someone he knew, but someone he felt. A girl, maybe 20. Dark hair, worn boots. She stood in a crumbling classroom with shattered windows, teaching children who were too scared to ask questions, too hungry to hope. But still she taught. She told them about stars, about courage, about old songs written on stone. Rallen didn't understand all the words, but the feeling that stayed, and when he blinked, he was crying again. The sphere glowed brighter. Outside his cabin, the others whispered. They'd seen things too. One technician claimed he remembered building a bridge in an ancient city of glass. A miner said he dreamed of dancing to music he'd never heard. They were changing. All of them. Not infected. Not broken. Expanded. The sphere wasn't just a vault. It was an invitation. In the galactic core, deep in the golden halls of the High Council, panic bloomed. The transmission from Thalix's fleet had finally reached them delayed, filtered, nearly blocked by interference. But it got through, and with it came the signal. Not just data. Something deeper. Something older than any known encryption. A resonance. Dozens of counselors were already in containment, their minds cracking under the strain. One ambassador reportedly took his own life after drawing strange spirals over his office walls, the same spirals found etched into Earth's last broadcast. And through it all, one question kept rising from terrified lips. What did the humans awaken? The Grand Archon sat alone in the central chamber, reviewing the footage for the 5th time. The final image of Thalix's face. Eyes wide, calm, not terrified, not defeated, just resolute. "I was wrong," the Archon whispered, voice trembling. He had argued against helping Earth, had called humanity volatile, unstable, unsuited for deeper galactic integration. But now, in the face of a creeping silence swallowing systems one by one, he realized Earth wasn't a threat. Earth had been a barrier, a firewall. And now it was gone, and something had stepped through. In the void where the Council fleet had once stood, something impossible happened. A voice, faint, wavering, but real. It echoed through the dark like a ripple. It didn't come from outside. It came from within the silence, from the sparks, from the survivors. They had no mouths, no bodies, but they had memory. And memory, when held with enough pain, enough love, enough refusal, becomes its own kind of sound. The voice spoke only 3 words. "We are here." The creature recoiled. Not visibly. It had no face, but the entire void shivered, not because of power, but because of proof. The humans were gone, and yet not. They refused to be undone. And now, the fire was spreading. Another vault activated. Far from Rollins' frozen rock, deep in the atmosphere of a gas giant, a second pod began to glow. It had landed 2 months prior, sinking into the clouds unnoticed. A scavenger drone passed nearby and was pulled toward it by an inexplicable gravitational drift. Inside the drone's circuits, static bloomed. Then images, words, echoes. The drone was primitive. It didn't understand emotion, but it remembered. Its internal database began to fill with strange data. Stories, faces, a history that had never existed in its code before. And then without command it transmitted. The signal bounced, encrypted, curved along the magnetic fields of the gas giant, bounced toward a nearby listening station. There, an engineer receiving the signal collapsed. Not from pain, from recognition. He didn't know what he knew, but he wept anyway. The thing in the dark twisted. It could no longer consume freely. Too many vaults had activated now. Too many fragments of Earth's scream were leaking through. And it began to realize with something like fear that memory was not the end of a thing. It was the beginning. Humans were not merely mourned. They were retold. And stories, especially stories, soaked in blood, regret, rage, and longing had a way of surviving where logic failed. It shifted tactics. If it could not erase from the inside, it would corrupt from the outside. It moved toward the outer colonies, places with weak minds, places where memory could still be poisoned. But as it reached the edge of a new system, it found resistance. Not ships, not weapons, but names, painted on walls, whispered in prayer, carved into rocks, children speaking of places they'd never been, artists drawing symbols they didn't understand. Memory had taken root. Like weeds in the cracks of silence. It wasn't clean. It wasn't complete, but it was enough. And for the first time, the creature hesitated. In the dream space between unbeing and rebirth, Thalix stood, whole, but not as he was. He was no longer flesh, but he was self. He had taken in too much to fall now. Humanity's sorrow lived in him like a second spine. He saw them, All of them the sparks of his crew, even Core, flickering weakly, but still lit. And he saw the creature ahead, endless, hollow, rage without reason. It tried to speak to him, tried to force its presence through. But Thalix raised a hand, not a physical one, but one shaped by all the things he'd learned from the humans. He thought of the rooftop girl, of the soldier in the trench, of the boy with the dying dog. He thought of Earth. Then, simply he spoke, "You don't own this." And with that, the silence broke. Not completely, but the first crack had formed. Something cracked, not just in the void inside the creature. It wasn't made of bone or blood. It had no body. But it was real. A presence older than time, feeding on unbeing. For eons, it existed on the borders of memory, gnawing at forgotten worlds, swallowing civilizations not yet strong enough to leave a trace behind. But now, something had changed. Someone had said no, not with weapons, not with gods, with a name, with a memory, with story. And now it couldn't finish its meal. The silence it wore like skin was no longer comfortable, because that silence had been broken. It tried to repair the breach, turning inward to smother the sparks inside. The remnants of Thalix, Core, and the others, those who had been absorbed when Earth was consumed, were no longer quiet. They had formed a voice, a rhythm. They weren't individuals anymore. They were witness, and witness could not be unmade. On the mining outpost where Rollin had first found the memory sphere, people had changed. It started with dreams, then names, then language. He no longer remembered what his native tongue sounded like, but he could now speak flawless English, Earth English, the kind that echoed from old broadcasts and half-lost songs. Others followed. Mechanics and cooks started quoting ancient poems. Children drew constellations they'd never studied. A woman in the infirmary began humming the theme to a long-extinct Earth cartoon, tears rolling down her face. They weren't just remembering anymore. They were becoming. The council dispatched a surveyor vessel, thinking the outpost had suffered a psychic breach. It arrived silently and left just as quickly because by the time they landed, the crew of the outpost had vanished into the mines. When they emerged 3 days later, they brought with them another pod. This one was larger. Inside was a map, not of stars, but of stories. It showed Earth not as a location but as an origin point, a conceptual ground zero from which memories had begun to re-spread across the galaxy like seeds. Each marked point was a node, a place where humans had once lived, died, dreamed. Colonies now gone. Battlefields long covered in ash, but still vibrating, still echoing, still telling. In the council chambers, panic no longer simmered. It boiled. One by one, systems began reporting anomalous behavior. Not physical invasions, not even ships, but people across species dreaming of Earth. A merchant on Larava 9 claimed to have lived an entire second life in the body of a human jazz singer from 1952 Chicago. A scientist in the crystalline city of Vemel confessed to remembering how to bake cornbread despite never tasting food in his entire life cycle. And in the gardens of Elathun, a child born from spores recited, word for word, the preamble of the United Nations Charter. It wasn't infection. It was inheritance. The creature hadn't killed humanity. It had spread them. And in doing so, it gave their stories roots in 1,000 new minds. Now, the silence that once protected the creature was being torn apart not by force, but by recognition. The council, once proud and unbending, now debated something they'd never imagined. Should we speak of Earth again? Should we honor the memory? Should we restore? But others feared the consequence. What if remembering is what feeds the creature? What if we're inviting it in? To that, one voice answered, "Then let it come. We'll burn it from the inside." It wasn't a council member who said that. It was the janitor, an older woman who'd never spoken in the chamber before. She stood, holding a small metal cube, another pod. "I remember my father," she said softly. "He died before Earth fell. He was a mechanic. But last night, I saw his hands again, felt them on mine. I woke up, and this was on my pillow." She placed the cube down, and for a moment, the entire chamber filled with the sound of wind, earth wind, rustling trees, distant traffic, children laughing. The silence hissed at the sound, but it couldn't stop it. The janitor smiled. I may have never seen Earth, but Earth has seen me. Back in the void, the sparks were growing brighter. Thalix floated at the center now. He no longer tried to remember who he had been. That part was done. He was memory now. A composite soul, a carrier of stories. He saw the creature circling, wounded but vast, still trying to consume, still trying to erase. But it had underestimated what memory could become. You think forgetting is silence, Thalix spoke into the void, but forgetting is never the end. The moment one soul remembers what was lost, you fail. The creature shivered, and from within it, more sparks ignited. Screams once drowned now rose again, not in pain, in rebellion. In orbit over the ruins of a forgotten human colony, another pod awakened. This one was found by a salvage ship. When the crew opened it, they found only a single photograph. It showed a group of laughing friends on a beach. No coordinates, no names, just smiles, sand, and sky. And on the back of the photo, "We were here." The captain of the salvage ship stared at it for a long time. Then he set course not back to base but toward Earth's former location, empty, cold, but no longer a tomb. Because now, everywhere across the galaxy, Earth was awakening. The creature, now exposed, tried one last move. It sent out a false memory, a poisoned memory. Something beautiful. A world where Earth never burned, where humanity thrived, where the Council came in time, where no pods were launched, no screams were needed. It tried to trick the sparks into submission, tried to smother them in fantasy. But humans had always known the difference between fantasy and truth. And truth, though often brutal, carried weight. The sparks refused the lie, and the dream shattered like glass. And then, Earth responded. Not the planet. The idea, every memory pod across the galaxy, from the deep crusts of mining moons to the clouds of drifting gas giants, pulsed at the same moment, synchronized, coordinated. And in that instant, the creature understood the final horror. Humanity hadn't scattered by accident. They had made themselves into weapons. Memory was the fuse, emotion, the charge. And now, they were going to ignite. The void cracked, truly cracked. And through that tear, Earth spoke. Not a voice. A billion voices. Some sobbing, some laughing, some screaming. All real. And the words they said, "We are not gone," the void screamed. Not like a living thing, not like something that felt fear the way mortals did, but like a truth being unwritten against its will. The silence that had once stretched endlessly, blanketing systems, consuming history, cracking identity like old glass, was now tearing at the edges. It hadn't expected this. Not resistance. Remembrance. The very act of being remembered was corroding its insides. Not just Thalix and the scattered minds that refused to fade, but something deeper. Something ancient that had been forged in Earth's chaos and made into something terrible, bright, and uncontainable. Meaning, the creature had devoured the body of humanity, but the soul, the messy, raging, grieving, passionate, stubborn, spiteful soul was still moving. It wasn't organized. It wasn't clean. It wasn't even logical. But it was real. And real things don't go quietly. The final pod activated. It came down through the atmosphere of a planet called Jeren Ve, a quiet colony planet known for its sandstorms and sulfur oceans. The people there were simple, a hybrid race descended from early human interbreeding generations ago. They spoke no Earth languages, ate no Earth food, worshipped no Earth gods. But when the pod struck ground, the winds stopped, the oceans stilled. The skies turned violet with tension. A group of children found it first. They were playing in the dunes, tossing metal scraps from old cargo wrecks. When the pod hissed open, they didn't run. They stood in a loose circle, small hands reaching out. The youngest, a girl with silver veins in her skin, touched it gently, and Earth flooded in. Her eyes rolled back. And when they came forward again, she whispered, in flawless English. "Remember us. We bled for you," we screamed, and the stars were quiet. But now, we screamed back. The children all heard it. So did their parents. So did the central satellite towers, whose feeds had never picked up human bandwidth before. But now, every screen across the colony lit up with one word: Earth, and that was enough. Thalix stood on the edge of the memory plane. It wasn't space. Not really. But it had weight now. Form, time. Everything the creature had once dissolved into nothing was reforming, because humans hadn't just remembered. They had shared. And in sharing, the fire had spread across the stars like dry lightning on paper. Kor stepped beside him, still flickering, but clearer now. His eyes were no longer haunted. They burned with something deeper: conviction. "I never believed in them," he said softly. "Never trusted them." Thalix didn't respond. "You were right," Kor added. "They weren't dangerous because of what they could build. They were dangerous because of what they could feel." Thalix looked upward. The void was shattering. Cracks stretched like lightning across space, and from within them, voices poured through. Arguments, lullabies, apologies, angry breakups, final farewells, birthday songs sung badly. They weren't just memories. They were echoes of identity. Billions of them, all impossible to fake, all impossible to stop. A galaxy full of people, many who had never touched Earth, were now carrying it, living with its memories inside them, real or imagined, and that was the final blow. The creature could not swallow what refused to be alone. It didn't know how to process shared pain. It didn't understand what it meant to carry grief like a weapon. It tried one last move. The lights dimmed. The pressure rose. The sparks began to collapse again, but this time there was structure. The sparks weren't loose fragments anymore. They had become a shape, a human shape. Dozens of forms began knitting together in the void. Memory wrapped itself around purpose. Story layered over will. It wasn't resurrection, not in the flesh, but in something far more durable, in meaning. A figure stepped forward, cloaked in noise. In every voice, in every song, in every name lost to time, she looked human. But she was made of every human. She was Earth, not the soil, not the map. The being, the myth, the scream. She raised her hand. The creature buckled. Blackness folded around itself like a collapsing lung. It couldn't hold form, couldn't maintain shape, not in the presence of a species that had mastered creation through pain. "You took our world," she said, not with a mouth, but with every voice that had ever spoken from Earth's crust to its stars. "But you forgot the first law of being human." The creature tried to flee, but there was nowhere left to go. No clean ground, no silence untouched. Every system it had once fed on had been infected, now carrying traces of laughter, grief, fury, poetry. "You tried to make us nothing," she said, "and all you did was make us everywhere." The final blow wasn't light. It wasn't fire. It wasn't sound. It was a name. "We are Earth," and the void, at last, shattered. Not into pieces, into story. Across the galaxy, the aftermath was immediate. People woke from dreams and cried without knowing why. Children spoke the names of long-dead Earth cities in their sleep. Untranslatable songs began appearing in alien music libraries. Poems wrote themselves on the walls of forgotten places. And somewhere, far beyond the core systems, a small boy, born on a dust station with no known ancestry, stood up during class and recited the Gettysburg Address. When asked what he was doing, he smiled and said, "I think someone was trying to be remembered." In the Council's deepest archives, a forbidden vault sealed for centuries clicked open on its own. Inside was a single photograph. It was old, black and white, torn at the edges. A man and a woman, sitting on a porch, smiling. On the back, faded ink read, "No matter how far the stars go, don't forget the ones who looked up first." They hung the photo in the chamber, not because it meant anything politically, but because, in that moment, it felt right, and they never took it down. Thalix drifted through the afterspace with Kor at his side. They weren't dead. They weren't alive either. They were keepers now. Watchers. Wherever silence grew too thick, they would appear, carrying names, carrying stories, carrying the memory of the day Earth died, and how, through that death, the stars were taught what it means to matter. Thalix smiled. Do you hear that? Kor nodded. Yeah. It was soft at first, then louder. Music. Human music. A messy jazz riff followed by screaming rock and then a gospel harmony that made even the dead turn toward the sound. Not beautiful, not perfect, but real and alive. And then, for the first time in a long time, the stars stopped being quiet.